All right, let's start. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Biotensegrity party. We're so happy to have you all here. Um, Today we've got a special presentation for Steve, but first, let me introduce my co-hosts. I'm Susan Lowell de Solorzano. I'm in Washington, D.C., and my co-hosts are Chris Marita Clancy. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Susan, coming to you all from the territory of the Coast Salish Nation, near Vancouver, Canada.
Great. And Graham Scar.
Hello, I'm from sunny but very cold and snowy Nottingham in the
Oh,
UK.
Really?
Nottingham.
Really?
Graham, you have snow.
Do very unusual for this time of year.
Wow. Okay. And today we've got a very special presentation, Steve's latest, except as we were getting ready to go live, he was in the process of making his next presentation. So you cannot keep up with this man. Steve, hi, and please tell us about your fabulous hat.
Yes, I exchanged this hat. I got this hat in about 1960, 61 when I was in the army and doing maneuvers with the British Army of the Rhine. And I exchanged my hat for his hat. So which was sort of a traditional thing to do in those days. So I have this hat since, so it comes, it's a British officer hat from the field hat. So that's the history of it. But it dates from 1960, 61 that I've had it.
Wow, that's great. Steve, you want to give us a toast?
Ah, well, to all my many friends and compatriots in this, and particularly to Susan, who's done a marvelous job working on this paper. We worked on this paper together. I wish you all the best for another new year.
All right. Cheers, everyone. It's great to see everyone. Okay, I guess what we'll do is, Steve, maybe you'll share and everybody will turn off their mics and videos and we'll watch your presentation.
Yeah, good.
In our attempt to understand the dynamics of life, we create models. And those models are most often based on our understanding of machines. Machines are constructs that are designed to perform a task. They exist near equilibrium, meaning it takes very little energy to maintain their physical structure. They can be reverse engineered so that understanding the parts may get us to understand the whole. And they do not depend on the energy that powers them for their very existence. There are other models. The event model, represented here by a tornado, is one. Tornadoes are events that occur far from equilibrium, combining a variety of forces and elements coming together, self-organizing as a dynamical system that would later disassemble itself into its component parts of wind and water and debris that of themselves seem to have no purpose and lack any semblance of organization. They exist far from equilibrium and require a constant input of energy and cease to exist when that energy dissipates. Reverse engineering is near impossible. We may be able to model a tornado in a bottle, but it is a transient event which requires a continuous input of energy. A bottled tornado doesn't exist. It is an occurrence. But it is useful in helping us understand the intricacies of a tornado. Bioengineers and mechanics have used the machine model and statics and open-chain kinematics in their attempts to model the movement of organisms. They studied the forces on the body as if it were an architectural building fixed in space. Let me introduce you to one of the pioneers in the studies of biodynamics, William P. Lombard, professor of physiology at the University of Michigan. In 1907, he described what has become known as Lombard's paradox. Let's have a go at it. Put one hand on your anterior thigh and your other hand on your posterior thigh. Now stand up. What you have experienced is a co-contraction of what have been considered as antagonistic muscles. To refresh your memory, in standard lever biomechanics, to create movement there is a working muscle, the agonist, and an opposite muscle, the antagonist. When one muscle is working, its opposing muscle is relaxed, and the role of which does what to whom can be reversed. Back to Lombard's paradox. Here, muscles co-contract and work in parallel. There are no agonists and antagonists. Like Schrodinger's cat being both dead and alive, a paradox is a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement, and in our world we can think of it as contradicting a paradigm. But wait! That hamstrings and quads co-contract should not have been a surprise to Lombard, who wrote an article on the jumping frog. He replaced the muscles crossing two joints with string, and he found that flexing the hip would create movement in the entire limb in a coordinated jumping pattern that would be occurring in a leaping frog. In the jumping frog, flexion and extension at the hip produce simultaneous flexion and extension of the knee and ankle. Note that the muscles remain isometric, the same length, and isotonic, the same tension. What Lombard was describing but did not quite have a word for it was closed kinematic chain. Then, as it is now, complex biological processes are reduced to simplistic machine models based on levers and open chain two-bar kinematics. In the early 1900s, kinematics was still a new science. It considered motion without consideration of the cause of motion, and introduced concepts like vector, speed, and acceleration, all absent in static lever mechanics. Rouleau's book on machinery of motion set the new standard. Getting back to closed kinematic chain in Lombard's frogs, a closed kinematic chain is a number of links with a minimum of 4, which are connected by joints. The chain becomes a mechanism when one of the links is defined as the fixed link. The mechanism becomes a motor mechanism when one or more links is driven. As an example of how this works, we'll use the pantograph. Although not used much anymore, it was a common device used for copying and enlarging in the art world and in manufacturing. Here you see by copying a small drawing you can enlarge it several fold. Let's break down what's happening. Small movements at one end of the device come out as much larger and faster movements at the other end. In his treatise on motion of animals, Aristotle noted this back even before my time, in 350 BC. The speeding up also has consequences. Kinetic energy, the energy that moves us, is 1/2 mass times velocity squared. And to give you some perspective on this, when the velocity of an object doubles, its kinetic energy quadruples. An automobile traveling at 60 miles an hour has 4 times the impact of an automobile going 30 miles an hour. So now we see what has been described as paradoxical movement in a couple of distantly related vertebrates. Can we still call it paradoxical movement? And what if we also find it in flies and cockroaches and caterpillars, fish of all sizes, shapes, and species? and the locking mechanism of a horse that allows it to sleep standing up, and the cruciate ligaments in the knees of all walking vertebrates, the wrist and forearm in humans, and if you start looking around keeping the four-bar mechanism in mind, you'll see it everywhere. And with due respect to Tom Myers, who was one of the first to talk in terms of applied dynamics rather than statics, it becomes clear that his muscle trains are open kinematic chains, but if front lines and back lines work in tandem, his anatomy trains function not in series as trains do, but as funiculars that operate as closed kinematic chains in parallel. Here it is at the micro level in intervertebral discs, the mechanics of a virus, and at the molecular level, as in the chair boat flip of cyclohexane. Now, a single paradox challenges a paradigm. Multiple paradoxes require a rethinking of the paradigm, a paradigm shift. What is needed is a new paradigm that make those apparent paradoxes irrelevant. Closed kinematic chains seem to fill the bill, and they're relevant at every scale level. Let me bring you back to something you might have missed on one of the earlier slides. In a closed kinematic chain, for the most part, muscles remain isometric and isotonic, the same length and the same tone. Professor Cleland noted this in 1867, where he noted that muscles often behave as ligaments, meaning they didn't behave as springs, more as tensioners like turnbuckles. They maintained tension in the system, but did not further contract it. Let's get back to making it bigger. Small movements here, and even smaller movements at the start, generate much larger movement at the distal end. The output can be adjusted in various ways, and there are many combinations and permutations of these mechanisms, and they are applicable at any scale. This is Jules from Mechanisms 101. As you can see in this theoretical model, small movements at the spine may be generating much larger movements at the periphery, and locking one bar may lock up the whole system. This points out the role of muscles acting as joint restrictors and not just joint movers. That muscles in the back could be a driving force in body mechanics was touted by my good friend and colleague Serge Grekovetsky in his book The Spinal Engine. His video of a quad amputee shows how the spine is driving the limbs and not the other way around. And the importance of changes in velocity and energy conversion cannot be overestimated. Even relatively small increments of velocity may have profound consequences. Here is Coach Justin from Ultimate Baseball showing how to throw a ball.
It starts from the ground, all right? So all of our momentum, all of our velocity comes from that ground force really driving down through the ground. From there, once we drive through the ground, that works its way, all that energy works its way up the kinetic chain, and then our core, it transfers into our arm, and eventually it goes out of our fingertips when we make the throw. But just the biggest thing is understand that throwing does not come from just all arm, right?
With remarkable insight, Coach Justin got it mostly right. Let's pause a moment here to clear up some confusion. Kinetic chain is a misnomer. Both the so-called open and closed kinetic chains are really kinematic chains. Kinetics deals with analyzing forces acting on an object. Kinematics refers to the geometry of motion, essentially how you design a machine to perform a task. This is the kinetics of Ryan Krauser, Olympic champion, throwing the shot. Our concern here is the weight of the shot and the ground reaction force affect his movement. This is the kinematics of Ryan Krauser, throwing the shot. and here in slow motion. The concern is not the weight he is throwing, but the dance he is doing. Open kinematic chains are based on energy inefficient second and third class lever systems that, instead of taking energy from the ground, are, in theory, powered by muscles internal to the system, a concept that would have Newton turning over in his grave. Open kinematic chains operate in series like falling dominoes, but closed kinematic chains operate synchronously and in parallel, like slats in a Venetian blind. Back to Coach Justin.
Starts from the ground, all right? So all of our momentum, all of our velocity comes from that ground force really driving down through the ground. From there, once we drive through the ground, that works its way, all that energy works its way up the kinetic chain, right? And then our core, it transfers into our arm, and eventually it goes out of our fingertips.
I would suggest that he is describing a closed kinematic chain, taking energy from the ground and throwing it out the hand. This is a Jensen mechanism, a 10-bar closed kinematic chain that the artist Theo Jensen used to walk his strand beasties across the beach. The basic closed kinematic chain mechanism revolves around a central point and is driven by a crank powered by an external force, the wind. Now let's take the basic mechanism and turn it on its head. We can envision the force coming from the ground, sucked up into the center of mass, and thrust out through the arm. Let's do that again. The wind-up and the pitch. Let's listen to Coach Justin one more time.
It starts from the ground, all right? So all of our momentum, all of our velocity comes from that ground force really driving down through the ground. From there, once we drive through the ground, that works its way, all that energy works its way up.
So it's not muscles that powers you. It is the pushback you get from the ground that powers your movement. That energy of movement, kinetic energy, is taken up by the body's springs and is converted to potential energy, where it is stored in those springs. The body's muscle, bone, and fascia are springs, and those springs are the compression springs of bone and the tension springs of muscle and fascia. Since ground reaction force compresses the body, you would think that the initial storage would be in the bone that are also the better springs, as you can see in this graph. The failure to recognize bone as a spring, and quite possibly its most significant spring, robs the body of its major storehouse for potential energy. In a closed kinematic chain and in a tensegrity system, the tension and compression actually work in parallel, so the forces are combined and focused. And that leaves us with somewhat of a confusing picture of muscle. In closed kinematic chains, muscles collaborate, and often muscles act as ligaments, maintaining tension without actually shortening or lengthening. A major role of muscle would be, of course, creating stability. But the driving force of a closed kinematic chain is external to that chain, and something needs to stir it up, like wind or much more likely ground reaction force. As the economist George Box said, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. Now, strand beasties and their component parts are machines, and closed kinematic chains are machines. And coupling them with tensegrity models, they seem ideal for modeling the machine mechanics of organisms, and they are far superior to any previous model. As you may have surmised from my earlier comments, I am into tornadoes. Life is an event that occurs far from equilibrium and requires a constant input of energy to sustain it. If you don't believe me, try holding your breath for a few minutes. And here are a few references questioning the machine model. There are many more. So what happens to a machine model in an event world? It is our tornado in a bottle that gives us insights into more complicated events. It is one of those useful models that George Box talks about. It will take time and the involvement of future generations for us to deepen our understanding of life events. Meanwhile, we'll do the best we can.
Okay. Joe Pristola, are you there? Can you share your comment with everyone?
Oh no, I just read the shot put thrower is Joe Kovacs. It's not Ryan Krauser.
Oh,
Just just a note there.
Yeah,
But but since I have your attention there, so say a throw like the famous
hold
Jeter
on, hold
throw.
on, hold on. Joe, I know you so well, but not everybody might know you or remember you. Will you just tell everybody about who you are? Because you've been working with Biotensegrity longer than I have, I think.
Yeah, the supervisor of PE Health and Safety, Elizabeth Public Schools, and I also most of my career was an athletic trainer. If there's anyone here over in Europe, it's in the United States, an athletic trainer is kind of a physio that just specializes in sports injuries. So. Yeah. So my question for Doc Levin is okay. So the famous Derek Jeter throw. I don't know if everyone is familiar with it, but one thing he was famous for when he used to track down a screaming line drive or a ground ball. And then instead of stopping and just kind of planting into the ground, and then making the throw over to first base, like most shortstops would do, he would continue running, and then he would go airborne. He would jump into the air and make the throw while he was in the air. Um, so is that still, would that still be considered, ground reaction force because he jumped off the ground? Would those muscles be kind of storing the energy there, or?
absolutely. What he's done is he's stored the potential energy in his body and was able to unleash it because the ball is so much smaller than he is. He could throw that ball,
Let
and
me
he,
let
and-
let me
yeah.
let me share it so everybody can see it, then we'll all know what we're talking about. Hold on a second. Uh
Yeah.
yeah. Let's see. Go back to the beginning. It's only about a minute, so
Hit toward the hole. Jeter backhands from the outfield grass. Got him! Man, what a play! 5-0 New York. This is about strength here. Now watch how far he goes in the hole to make this play, and then to be strong enough to leap in the air and make a strong, accurate throw. Look how strong that throw is and how accurate it is. That is about strength right there. I mean, this is a beautiful play. I don't know how many shortstops could make that play. You've got to be pretty strong to be able to do that. You got to have a lot of range, which he has, to get to it, and then the strength to make a throw from deep on the outfield grass and retire the runner at first base.
okay.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, so what he,
Go ahead, Joe.
he's just taking that energy and that he's built into his system. That leap in the air gives him a great deal of energy when he's at the peak of that jump. So he's coming down with that, with all that energy, the potential energy that he's stored in the body with his when his mass went up in the air. And so coming down, he has all this energy to give, and it's also why you can sort of, and beside that, the ball is essentially weightless at that point because it's coming from up to down. And anything that's falling from above is, anything that's falling is essentially weightless. So he has all this power and essentially a weightless thing that he can throw. I mean, it's amazing, but it's obviously there. And of course, as since he is a larger mass than that ball by a lot, he can get rid of it and throw it out of him out. For in space, for instance, if you can throw a ball, it will send you in the opposite direction as it does him. By the way, he has to fall at the same time he's throwing that ball, otherwise he can't let go of that energy. So it has to be an equal and opposite force. So his falling gives him the energy to throw that ball. So his timing has to be perfect. He has to throw that ball the instant he starts falling down. That's when he has the most energy. And it's some very simple physics. There's nothing complicated about it.
Yeah. Does anyone else have a comment? Because I have another one I wanted to put out there.
Well, I'm gonna on this same thing. I'm gonna show Saquon Barkley. Anyone who hasn't seen his reverse jump, it's another one of those wonderful things that we get to see in sports. And then afterwards, everybody's saying, "What the hell just happened?" So hold on just a second. This is from maybe a week ago or so. Maybe a couple weeks ago.
3rd and 6 for Philadelphia. Hurts has time. Now locates Barkley out of the backfield. Barkley slips 2 tackles and picks up the first down. Jumping up in the air to the 30. A gain of 14 for Barkley.
Out of moves right here. Makes the first guy miss. The spin move at the last second. Bro. And then, what, Tiki, you're right. What is that?
Bro, we got to see this again. This kid is special, man. Just, you didn't even think to do that.
Okay, so.
Will you try calling your husband? I'm just in town.
I gotta fix YouTube. Somebody else talk. Did you see that, Joe? Have you seen that?
Yes. Yeah. That used to be, by the way, that used to be illegal. They used to call it hurdling, and they used to throw the flag on that. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. Can I ask my next question? If
Sure.
nobody has it. Oh, okay. So, Doc, you mentioned before the 4-bar linkages. One of the things I see going on is like there's exercises, especially when it involves the hamstring, of specialized exercises that are developed just to kind of like exploit that 4-bar linkage. But one of the things that I'm wondering is because you did mention that these 4-bar linkages are all over the body. They're they're redundant. Even sometimes in the same in the same body area. So I wonder if it's possibly being too reductionist. By just kind of like concentrating on one 4-bar system.
Absolutely. Again, it goes back to the last bit I said. You use models to explain complex things. What's happening is much more complicated than that. You have layer upon layer of these things happening at the same time. So I cannot tell you which of the 4-bar leakages you're using to do any particular thing. All I can tell you is four-bar linkages are integral to the whole movement of the system. But at any one moment, I can't tell you which one is doing what to whom. It's because there are multiple ones doing everything at the same time. It is the closest I could get to talk about it in a sense is like fish swimming in a school or birds flying in a flock, that they're paying attention to not to the guy in the front, they're paying attention to the guy next to him. And all you have to do is the muscles and things talk to each other at that level. And they're responding at that level. So there is constantly changing and reassessing itself. And that's why you never throw the ball exactly the same twice, because little things are happening and the body automatically does these changes just as the fish do when they're swimming in a school and the birds in a flock. They just sense what's going on around them and adjust to that immediately. And it's though, and but the mechanism within the body seems to be these four bar or multiple bar linkages because it all fits into the other models.
And as Mariana points out in the chat, right, it's fractal as well. It's multiple scale levels happening simultaneously too. It reminds me of, Houston Smith wrote about Hinduism being a monotheistic religion. And I remember reading it and thinking, what's he talking about? And he explains it. Says it's a monotheistic religion, but they recognize that that it cannot be conceived of by us. And so they have, hundreds and thousands or whatever number of different deities because each one is an embodiment of certain aspects of the inconceivable. And I think that's what we're kind of going with here. And, Joe, you said what Saquon did used to be illegal. I don't think he knew he was going to do it. Right? That wasn't planned. You can't plan that. You can't plan a car accident. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was self-organizing for sure. Yeah, it's not something that you could. It's not, in other words, not something that you could practice.
Yeah. Well, right. Now you're going to get all these coaches saying, "Okay, now we're all going to practice doing this." That's not the thing that makes that happen. I think you're right. And anyone who studies martial arts, it's a similar thing.
Yeah, it's so one thing I see is that again, like getting back to the four bar. So they're using it with the hamstring injury prevention, and again, hamstring injuries, they seem to be getting worse and worse. So I don't know, how valuable that type of training is. But another way that they're using it is they're saying that okay, with ACL injuries, which are absolutely on the increase. And they're saying most of the time that when the ACL injuries happen, there's a change of direction, and the torso is upright, right, in relation to is vertical in relation to the ground, and that position of the torso puts the what they call creates muscle slack in the lower leg, and then in the upper, I should say, in the upper leg. And it it kind of like sort of weakens or disengages that the four bar system between the quads and the hamstrings, and that's why the injury happens. So a lot of the training now involves trying to teach cutting techniques with the torso being being vertical for that reason. And the only problem being is most of the time, at least from my experience, like from all my years of athletic training, it's really the task constraints that forces that torso up straight. It might be somebody reaching behind them to grab a pass that was thrown a little too short, or because they're chasing a ball or chasing an opponent. So so again, it's I don't know, it would just seem inappropriate to me to teach that that forward torso position when cutting. I don't know how practical, how practical that is, or or even if it's even reasonable, to that it would become, subliminal, so to speak, an automatic. I don't know. So, but my point is, I think it's being misinterpreted, biotensegrity.
I'm sure it is. I mean, you have to understand the muscles are never lax. You can't relax muscles. There's always tension in the system, and it's only variable. And actually, in an athlete who's running, all the muscles are tense right through the whole system. And it's just nonsense to think you can relax any one of them.
Yeah. And Joe, we're going to see a lot of misunderstanding. This is biotensegrity in its growing pains, right? It's really been getting more well known these last few years, and there's going to be a lot of misinterpretation that comes along with that, I think. Anyone who wants to can turn their camera on. Why don't we go, Diane? You're up next for a question.
Thank you. I would just like to comment that I believe we've been seeing ballet dancers do a lot of this stuff for a long time. And the difference, of course, is the whole performance situation. And just a thought about Joe's comment on the ACL problem. Fixing one part of the body isn't going to fix the problem. You have to train the whole thing, and you have to train it on a regular patterned basis, because then the body is there for you when you need it. You can't manage it, pre-manage it for that kind of thing. But anyway, I just my thoughts about, I remember watching Baryshnikov when he first came to the West. And of course he could pretty much dance rings around any of the male dancers that we then had, including the Baryshnikov. I mean, including Nura, what's his name? And everyone worked at getting, he raised the bar. He raised the bar with all the male dancers, and ballet changed as a result of it. Anyway, that's it. Just comments.
Great. Bob?
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to continue the conversation and to maybe just throw my idea past Steve just to see if I got this, correctly. But looking at the athletics, looking at Jeter's throw and Saquon Barkley's jump, and I included a video on Chris's Sutra site about Barry Sanders running, who was a football player who just changed directions and could spin faster than his, I guess, his competitor, so he would always get free. So it is my understanding that with the ground reaction force, and when you get vertical, you say that at the top of the leap, they've got most of the energy stored, but they're essentially weightless. So the purpose of the jump then, I guess the next movement then, if you look at, is either, if you look at Jeter throwing, as he gets to the top, he then he shifts his weight in his air and he rotates his trunk, which then, helps propel the ball, to first base. Or I see, like, when Barry Sanders cuts or spins, he's almost vertical. He shifts his weight to he's almost vertical, and then he unweights himself. And then by either moving his upper body side to side or adding a rotation, he just self-organizes and spins faster than his competitor so that he can move more freely. I think, Baryshnikov, as Diane said, probably does the same thing. He just doesn't have to react to the other people on the field. But do I have that right? Is the vertical component of it, if there is to make the body weightless, so that then the other forces that are applied to the body, either through a weight shift or a rotation, then makes it the utilization of the stored energy better and more efficient?
I think you're getting it. As far that's what I envision this thing. Once you hit that, think of a pendulum swinging back and forth. When that pendulum hits that apex point, it has all the energy stored in it, but coming down, it's essentially weightless. Because as a falling body is essentially weightless. So you can have all that energy stored. At that point, you're accelerating as fast as you're going to accelerate. Well, until at least you start the acceleration. And gravity, again, is square of the distance and all that. So you'll at the bottom point, you're really the fastest. But getting that energy out of that system right there and throwing it by twisting your body is what happens. And divers do it and gymnasts do it. And all these people are doing exactly that. Simone Biles gets the highest jump off that springboard, and that's why she's able to do more because she's up higher than anybody else. And from that height, she can then have it. Now, the muscles are internal forces, and you can do all sorts of things internally. So you can twist your body around using your muscles, but you can't move yourself in any direction outside your body. It's all internal stuff. So think of think of you being in an airplane that's going, you're part of the mass of the airplane. And it doesn't make it, you can run up and down the airplane, you can do all sorts of things inside the airplane, but you're not doing anything to the ground. You're going 600 miles an hour over that ground. You see, so it's all so your body is doing internal things in the airplane, but having no effect outside it. And that's what you can do is when you're doing this, and the idea is to then get that thing to throw out. So if the mass is smaller than you can let it go and then it goes flying. And so you're exactly right. Eileen wants to know if that video, getting it available. First of all, it'll be on this channel, but it also, I have it up on my uh, personal YouTube channel. So it's readily available there.
Yeah. And
Uh,
and
and I'm having a great time making these things. I mean, I'm playing around with all sorts of stuff I never did before. It's really exciting to do that.
and Steve, tell me if this is right. So just as what's going on inside the airplane isn't affecting what's on the outside, and what's going on outside the airplane, the fact that we're going 600 miles an hour, isn't affecting you while you're inside of the airplane. You don't have that sense of
Right,
that kind of movement. So it's
right. It's all driven by the center of mass of the airplane. Once you're in that center of mass of the airplane, that takes over everything.
yeah. Everyone's quiet.
No, I just wanted to add on I still can't get over the bouncing bones article. That was outstanding work by you too. That was really that was really something else. I mean, after seeing that, I mean, it's hard to really kind of, to compare that to biomechanics. It just seems so much more of a reasonable an approach. That's applicable to to all species. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we hope you can join us on the 6th. I mean, it's not that we can't talk about it now, but we're definitely going to talk about it on December 6th. That'll be that tea party because yeah, I mean, I don't mind taking questions in the meantime, certainly, but this idea of events is something that you've been talking about, Steve, and I think Chris had questions about that too. And I think it's brilliant, actually. And I think when you first told me about your thoughts on it, I thought, oh gosh, here we go again. It's a new insight. I've got a whole new well I have to dive into and a whole new chunk of stuff to understand. Bye, Mariana. Thank you. Um, Chris, did you want to ask a specific question about the events,
Well,
occurrences, concept?
I was just thinking how important it is especially when we think about how easy it is to take a hold of a tensegrity and start looking at the thing, that the shift to talking about events helps us move more into an understanding of tensegrity as an event or a series of changing forces. But I was curious, Steve, to hear you talk more about that. What is an event? How does it compare to a process? And how do the two compare then also to what we've conventionally understood?
But
Yeah,
Chris,
well,
it's not that tensegrity is an event, it's that
Yeah,
biological
no,
systems
I do
are events.
understand that.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
understand that. What I was more referring to is the possibility that as we start to talk about the closed kinematic chains and as the forces and the inside as events, will that help us with some of the other problems that we find or the other misconceptions that we find continually popping up?
I think it does, because I think you then stop thinking of it as some very organized thing that's going on. This thing, the body reacts to the environment and to what's happening at the instant it's occurring. And all these things realign themselves for the special event that's happening. So at each instance of it's an event, and so you can't model it as a structure. It has to be something of that just comes together for the instant and then moves away from that point. Um, and since you are far from equilibrium, meaning you got to keep putting all this energy into the system, it means that things are happening and changing all the time. So that with each instant, there's a new event occurring. And it's a constant series of these events that are happening. So you can't think of it as a static structure. We just, again, you're just taking that instant in time and modeling that instant, but that instant never really exists because you're always passing through it. And so all you can do is get, an image in your mind, but it doesn't exist. There's nothing exists because it's happening. It's a happening. So it's like a tornado. You're moving, it's just fortuitous that the hot water and the wind swirling at the same place and the same thing creates this little event of a whirlpool thing, wind that then starts building its own energy and sucking more stuff up. But at any time you lose that energy, it just boom, it falls apart. It's not there anymore. So it's the energy that maintains the structure of this tornado. And the tornado is a dynamic process. It's not steady. You can't say I got exactly this tornado at any minute because it's never the same. It's always constantly changing. And you have to think of the body or all organisms as doing exactly that. You're always in a constant state of change, and that you can't stop that change. So there's never any time where you can perfectly take a picture of what's going on.
I wonder, if as we start to popularize, as we start to use this concept and think about it ourselves and share with our colleagues and your clients, for people like Joe and Maren working with the horse people and all our physiotherapists, if we start thinking about these things, do you think, Joe, that would help people shift from this, working specifically with the hamstrings to try and, like, if we start thinking about things as ever changing in events, how will that impact the way that people you see do their work?
Um, it's a good question, but I think the way I look at biotensegrity, it kind of like, it underpins, what we do, but it doesn't, but there are no biotensegrity specific exercises. But that's what I think makes it better than, than other approaches.
Yeah.
Really. Um, uh, I think it's we I think we're specializing too much. And I just think we just kind of have to, give create a better movement palette for athletes and give them a wide range of different experiences and working on different types of surfaces and that type of thing. But I mean something's going wrong. I don't know if did anyone see the Dak Prescott's hamstring injury, how he tore it?
Mhm.
He was throwing a pass. He just literally threw a pass. It wasn't from any awkward position or anything. He was planted. Nobody was rushing him to throw the ball. He literally just threw a pass and he filleted his the hamstring tendon there right off the pelvis. There's there's something going on. I guess again, I think it could be the over specialization. Um,
Joe, what's that athlete's name again?
oh, Dak Prescott from the Cowboys, the quarterback.
What's the first name?
DAK.
DAK.
Yeah.
Dak Prescott. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that, yeah. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
yeah, it was.
No, we got Diane and Adam with questions, but we got plenty of time.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Steve.
yeah. I ruptured my Achilles tendon twice, and it was just an event. I mean, it just happened, and I wasn't doing anything particular important or hard or running or jumping or anything. So there must have been, yeah.
Yeah.
So there must have been some degenerative process that had been going on for a while, and it just needed a minor thing to pop him loose. Um, so it wasn't, like he was just set up to rupture that thing. It was already, on its edge, and then he just put an extra little stress on it, and poof, it went. So I don't think that, he ruptured a perfectly normal tendon at the time he did it. It was already way into falling apart for whatever reason the previous injuries were. So, and that frequently happens is that you can get a relatively major injury, apparently relatively major injury from a minor event. And, as I said, my Achilles tendon ruptured twice doing nothing. And a different one, say one on one side, one on the other, a different, completely separate from one another. Why, I don't know. And it doesn't happen in old men. It seems to happen in the younger, in the middle ages. Old people break hips.
Diane, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you, Steve. You were saying something I was going to say, which is that hamstring injury did not happen from zero. It had been building up, and that pass just brought it out. I want to go back. I want to ask about events and processes. And I like the idea of the ongoingness of the body and how it works and all of that. That's what's we are working with that every moment of our day. But why is that ongoingness also not a process?
Well, a process implies that there's some organization to it. Something happens and something happens and something happens, and you can plan out a process. You know exactly, in a processing plant, you are moving from a raw product to a complete product or something, but it happens in particular stages and
Yes.
things are happening. In an event, bunch of things are coming together that may not have any direct relationship with one another at the beginning, and then they come and you have an event that occurs then and there. And it's not necessarily sequential. It's not sequential at all. It's what's happening at the moment.
Well, I don't think processes are like a chicken factory. Okay, that's
But that when you use the word process, that's what's implied by it.
oh
A,
that
s-
that's okay.
a step-by-step event thing happening until you get the event. It's a a process means things going in an orderly fashion. And an event just sort of is a coming together.
Okay. Okay, I can see that difference.
Yeah.
But when I look at somebody doing a movement sequence, I can see where the process, I can see that is an ongoing process, that it is unique in that moment. It will never be the same again. And I will be able to see where the problems are in it. I could probably, okay, there. So I have a little problem with event, but thank you for talking about it.
All right. Well, think of a lawn party where you're getting different suppliers coming in to supply that one party. They have no relationship to one another except at that event. And so the chef does one thing and the cake maker does another, but they could do it with someplace else and do something else otherwise. These all are coming together for a particular happening at that instant, and then they all go off on their own way again. There's no necessarily planning anything except I'm planning to make this cake and you're planning to do, to make the barbecue and somebody else is planning to do that. But there's not an orderly thing except one person sort of gathers it all together.
But every cake maker has his own process.
Yeah, and there
Yeah,
are millions of events happening at once, right? And at
right.
multiple scale levels. We're just trying to get to some language so that we can begin to understand that thing that's so hard to understand, I think. Okay, we've got a couple things. Adam's been waiting. Celeste has a question. And because I'm also getting things in the chat. And Steve, I don't know if you have handy Tom Fleming's um model, that CKC model that kind of flips and flips and flips, with like four tensegrities all interlinked.
No, I don't have it. I
I don't
don't
have
have it.
that handy. Okay, I know there's a film of it, um, because Craig was suggesting that that would be good to look at. I'm gonna see if I can find the film clip of it. Um, and why don't you go next, Adam, and then Celeste after Adam? How does that sound? Is Celeste still here? We may have lost her.
She's
Okay.
on the screen.
She is?
Her name and a black space and a space is on the screen.
Oh,
So
I do see it. Okay, great. So Celeste, you go after Adam. Go ahead, Adam.
Hi, there was 2 points that come to my mind. The first one was about this idea of that beautiful shot of the guy throwing the ball. I really like the idea you were saying about the ball thrower had to be heavier than the thing he was throwing for it to move away from him. And I wanted to know whether that would also, you could apply that principle to the idea of energy. The energy that the person had stored in him from making himself tense and jumping was sufficient to meet the energy that the ball had in his hand against gravity to create movement in relation to the rest of the energy fields around him. Could we look at it in those terms as well?
Yeah, well, you can, you're talking about forces.
Mm.
And you can then, yes, you can accelerate a force and get things to move. So you can move a heavy thing, say, by getting an accelerating force to them banging against it, but you have to have that accelerating force.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're talking about moving a force moving something.
Mm.
And as I showed with the cars and things, that depending on how fast you get it, that's how much more energy you can put into the system.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of terms of how when an athlete moves, one of these great videos of these athletes moving, they move united, they move as one unit. That way, when they tense and release their system, they're tensing and releasing their entire compressional tensional system to allow that whatever they want to do come out of them and release. So everything's tensing and releasing to create that moment with the right amount of force or energy to allow that movement to manifest. So I'm thinking of the whole body is an enormous set of interacting tensegrital models that combine to create that release.
Exactly right. And you have to think of them as springs.
Yes.
Your
Yeah.
energy stored as springs.
Yes, exactly. So you compress a spring, that creates a force, and then if you multiply that out by all the potential springs and forces in the body, somehow our nervous system can correlate it to create a movement.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
that's
I see.
yeah. And that I think that's lovely how you explain the difference between kinematics and kinetic. That sort of explains how those two things meet together to create movement. That was good to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
love making these things. I learn a lot. You have to know I learn a lot while I make them, and
Yeah.
reorganize my thinking. But I'm
Yeah.
also having a good time learning about how to make a movie, which is video, which is fun.
And can I just say one more thing? That's like so. It was really interesting what Joe said about there aren't any exercises that really take this in, but I disagree because any exercise that helps the person taking part in it to feel more integrated and whole is working in that direction.
Yeah.
So when we see, I really love that video you showed a while ago about the person walking more efficiently, and their time was just so incredibly impressed. They used that bouncing bone in a marathon or fast walking. So what they were doing, they were combining more and more of their springs to create movement in a much more efficient way. So I think that is a version of using exercise to become more linked together, which is what this system does.
I think what we're saying, Adam, is that right, our awareness of biotensegrity can informs
Yes.
we move, how we understand movement and all that stuff. But it's
Yeah.
not like here's a biotensegrity exercise because any movement of any biological organism at any scale level is going to have a biotensegral component.
Yeah.
It can't not.
Oh no, no. So what I'm saying, when they all link together, like we were just discussing, it becomes a biotensegral movement. So if you can find an exercise that, like when Joe's teaching someone how to throw, he's most probably worked out without realizing how to use the whole system, wind all the springs up and release them in a certain way to create an effortless throw. So in a way, he's already using the exercise. He's
Yeah.
already using the principles of it. That's what I was saying.
So I do have Craig. I found the film.
Thank you.
Yeah, Craig. Sorry, I've got too many conversations going on at once between texting and other things. Craig, I've got the film of Tom Fleming's floating fulcrums model moving, and I'll show it in a minute. But let's see if Celeste, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question for Steve is, would he mind going back to his comment about Tom Myers and the anatomy trains? I I believe I understood him to say they were portrayed as open kinetic chains. And as a body worker, I use his concept tremendously. And the concept that emanated from that with Dr. Verbeek and Rick in Denmark. But as someone who works with the entire body, I integrally, maybe intuitively, see the whole thing as a whole.
Yeah, but that's not how he describes him in the book, or talks about him. He talks about it as the front line and back line, and the different angles and the cross lines and all those, and relatively superficial. So he talks about them as one muscle linking to the next muscle in a chain of events. So and if the chain of, and that's a chain, and that's why I called him a train, because it's one after another, like cars after one after another, and that's an open kinematic system. Is saying you want to get it closed, if you just link in the opposite back ones, it works fine because they really work together and you use them together all the time. You don't think of using them together, but you certainly do. So even when
Well,
you are teaching it, that's what's happening.
and Thomas said that, that's a model that is a useful way to look so that you can see this line or that line. But he also acknowledges that it's all interconnected, but that it's
I
another
mean,
one of those all models are wrong, some are useful things, I think, Celeste, where it's like, he lays it out that way in the book so that people can start seeing what they hadn't seen before, what they maybe hadn't noticed before. This is my understanding. And Celeste,
his
you have
book was
far more training in this than I have.
his book was a
Remember when we did,
tremendous help to me.
when
In
yeah,
you know what I
absolutely.
mean?
When we did the
Well,
colloquy, Tom was saying that, you know, he wrote it, as he was understanding it. And of course it's all interconnected. Do you remember him saying that when we did the colloquy?
Yeah, but the thing is, even for myself, hon, even before, um, when you've got your hands on a living being,
Yeah.
okay, that organism, to me, you cannot but, I don't see how you can even approach it unless you are intuiting the entire connection. And even he and Rick and Vabik talk about these lines don't go in one direction. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Even there,
absolutely.
but I never saw them as, maybe it was me taking something he said and bringing it into my world, but I never saw them as a single train going in one direction. Never.
Yeah.
Not in my practical body work.
And so I think we're agreeing with you, but I think that there
right.
are, or at least the way I hear some people, just like we were saying earlier, there's a lot of misunderstanding about biotensegrity out there. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about anatomy trains out there. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, because each of us, I mean, let's face it, Susan, it's the human dilemma. we all take we all take in we take things in a way that we can understand it. None of us understand everything exactly the same. It's, to me, it's part of the human dilemma.
And the human advantage, because we see things differently, we can work together and
You know,
find new territory.
I can't thank Tom and Vabik and Rick enough for what they explored and what they um elucidated for the rest of us.
Yeah.
But I have never seen the trains as a unconnected. To me, that it's
Well,
a whole. It's
and
a whole.
I
And
think
when you see the
why,
reactions in the body, because I'm working on animals,
yes,
they're not using the blocking thought processes we do. You know what I mean?
yeah, and
That they have no baggage.
I
And you
think
will see reactions somewhere in the body or feel a reaction somewhere in the body, and you went, oh my God, how did that happen? And you were nowhere near that spot.
right, and I think this is why Tom introduces tensegrity and that concept early in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna go to I'm gonna attempt to screen share to show the thing that thank you, Craig, for waiting. Um let's see. Oops. Hold on. I'm gonna try to show this film of the bistable, what Tom Fleming's called a bistable fulcrum. So hang on. It's another
Oh,
CK
yeah.
thing.
Here are 4 levers, each with their own fulcrum, linked in a closed loop.
Can you hear
such
it?
that the output of one lever is the input of the one next to it. This linkage is bistable, and it wants to live in one of 2 states, both tetrahedral. As it approaches the middle, it's unstable and wants to flip into its opposite state. If you remove one fulcrum, the structure continues to operate, and this lever continues to do work. But now there's no bending moment because there's no
And it's
fulcrum.
not a lever. If you don't have a fulcrum, you don't have a lever. It's that simple. You need
The
a
linkage
fulcrum.
of levers in a system like this can substitute for the missing fulcrum. So it's possible now to think of levers without fulcrums, or at least fulcrums that only float and are not fixed. It's possible to model the bistable kinematics of the 4-lever linkage with no fixed fulcrums. 4 triangular tensegrity prisms can be loosely coupled in a 3D array that creates a bistable tetrahedral hub that is identical to the previous system, except instead of solid levers, there are tension members. This is a closed system with no externally fixed fulcrums and no bending moments, but it does the exact same work as the 4-lever system. This universal hub creates 2 revolute hinges operating at 90 degrees from each other, suggesting possible applications in robotic and prosthetic joints.
Yeah.
You can't call it a lever unless you have, what Archimedes called a lever. You have to have a rigid bar, you have to have a fulcrum, you have to have the fulcrum outside the system, the lever bar itself. You have to have a place to stand on. Show me, give me a lever, bar long enough and a fulcrum and a place to stand, and I can move the world. You can't do that. You see, and I have, I don't know if you can see this because
Hold
of
it
my,
closer to your body.
no, I got to, let me see if I can, well, I can't do that. See, but this is, I've had this for centuries now, you see, but there are no levers in the system. There are rotations around points and things like that, but you can't call them levers. And I think when you start putting levers in it, it confuses the whole picture.
I think he's using the word fulcrum to be the point which things are rotating around.
Then you have to say that. You can't fulcrum. Yeah, because fulcrum has a definition. I mean, you can't, if you're devising another device, you have to call it something else.
Yeah, so maybe he needed to look for that word because what he's saying is that you can have the fulcrum without the lever. That's what he's demonstrating.
Well, you
Then,
can't.
yeah, but then I guess we don't call it a fulcrum. You're saying we need a different word.
Yes, and you're just rotating around the point and things like, as I said, I've had this model here yeah, for a long time, and and it does all those kind of things that he describes, and I can get it compressed down, I can get it up, I can get it to do
Yeah,
inside out and outside in, but it's not levers.
right, right. Craig, Camilla had a question. Can you hang on and wait for Camilla? Camilla, are you there or maybe not?
I am here, but it was related to what Joe and Adam said, and they both signed off. And I just wanted to ask some more questions related to the biotensegrity informed exercises.
Go
And
ahead.
also,
you can still ask your question. I think you may have muted yourself.
You,
yeah, I have put the video, but I muted myself. Because it's related to Celeste, what Celeste said also, because I feel it's not necessarily that when there are closed kinematic chains that we are considering, it's necessarily biotensegrity informed, because it can still be, the movement still be understood in very linear way in some ways. And in a way, when we consider biotensegrity as way of thinking and all its topics inside, it can be any exercise or movement. It can be biotensegrity informed. And what we are discussing about the anatomy trains and the lines, I think it's about how you look at things, because Celeste, from what I hear, she understands it's a whole. It's all the time changing, whole organism. But some people, what I experience, they are understanding it in a very linear way. And I think that might be the issue. When you look on it, just it's the map versus territory. You start to focus on one thing, seeing the concrete thing in the body, but everybody is different and changing all the time. And at the same time, for example, Kimi has beautiful example of closed kinematic chains 4-bar in the body that we were just uh, giving as an example how things can be connected in the body. But if you just focus on this particular 4-bar kinematic, closed kinematic chain, it's not inside of the body. Like it's just one, it's not, doesn't look like that. It's changing all the time. So it's about like being able to make the shift and understand the models are just models and it's not exactly what's going on. So yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. I was curious what how Joe was thinking, because he's for sure working with different people than I do. So yeah.
And Joe put into the chat, do chains exist or are they in the mind of the beholder? And I think part of what's going on is that there are these, let's call them events, let's call them alliances, let's call them patterns of organization that 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 we invoke or that come together and then are relinquished as needed, and that the body's able to do that.
I'm just keeping in mind kids Mariana works with, and people who have different shapes of body and they're missing a limb and they're like organized in completely different way than the universal body we are thinking about. And I just see that it can be very easy to take part of what we're talking about and make it general again. And I just wanted to point that out, that it's just in process, but it would be nice to not simplify it completely, I guess. Like a tornado, like there's no two same ones.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
When I was in my clinical years, anytime I finished treating a patient, where even the surgical years, and right through them all, I always finished off all my treatment patterns with rhythmic patterned exercises, walking, running, swimming, anything that got the whole body going in a repetitive pattern that was a rhythmic pattern kind of thing. And to me, looking back on it, that's what I was doing, was reestablishing the tensegrity concept in the whole body of it working as a functional organism.
Or
So if they
helping
had
the
an injury,
integrity system
yeah.
become more coherent, more integrated, more organized, or more optimally organized.
Resetting the activities.
So, so if I had somebody, I operate on their knee, I fix the knee and I do the exercise for the knee, but I always have to finish this. Okay, now you got the knee working, you got to get it into the whole body, into the whole thing working together as part of the system. And so, and as I said, I did that long before I even had a tensegrity concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how learning happens. Learning starts with you find or create some difference, and then you reintegrate that difference into the functioning of the whole. So it's a constant dynamic between differentiating and reintegrating. And without that reintegrating, the rhythmic pattern activity of walking or running or dancing or whatever it might be, then the change to the knee or to the muscle or other bit is likely to be rejected because it's not immediately useful.
Say that again, Steve Schafferman.
This is a core idea with Feldenkrais thinking and in FlexAware, is that all learning involves a dynamic of differentiating and reintegrating.
Yes.
So you experience some difference, and then you reintegrate that into the functioning of the whole. And if you don't have some practice of reintegrating, then the difference is likely to be forgotten or rejected because it's not useful. Learning and walking and all behavior has to be functional. It has to relate to our ability to be effective in the world.
Yeah, I think you say that very well, Steve. You've very well said. This is why you can't just add an appliance to a broken hip and send it away. You have to integrate that. Not only that, you have to continue for a lifetime. You have to continue to support that change because you have not added natural material. You have added natural material. You have it's surrounded by natural material, and that natural material is surrounded by everything else. So you have to support those changes. And this is very hard to get people to do because they think, oh, I'm walking fine. My hip works fine. Whoa, what's the big deal? Well, it isn't, it's a big deal because it is not a natural change. And you have to add organized rhythmic patterns to that in order to keep it going. And I see I see so many people where this does not happen. They kind of forget. Anyway.
Yeah, we forget.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we're always learning all the time. And if we're not practicing the new possibilities, we inadvertently fall back into what was habitual from the past. And this is part of the neurology of chronic pain and dysfunction, and relates to the past conversation about Dak Prescott's torn hamstring and Steve's ruptured Achilles. And changes are happening all the time, and then they reach a breaking point. But if we're learning to move more skillfully, then at any age we can move more skillfully. Healing happens, learning happens.
Yes. But you need programs to do that. It doesn't just happen.
Right.
Yeah, you have to learn something. there's a learning process of learning programs.
Well, and that's part of what I've been creating over the years with FlexAware is practices that continually reinforce our sense of being whole and of muscles everywhere working harmoniously and efficiently so that every effort is fully distributed.
I would tell my Tai Chi students who had, came in with replaced hips and knees and such. It's like, and they said, well, what do I do? And I said, well, you treat this as a welcome guest. And you are continually relating to this and treating it as a welcome guest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an ongoing process, as you say, Diane, I think.
Yes.
Craig's been waiting a while. I know Camilla's got a question too, but Craig, did you want to jump in?
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Craig, just go really slowly because it's like you've got a reverb or something. So it's like you're talking in a huge room where the sound has to go out. So just go really slowly and I think we'll be able to understand.
Can you give me a thumbs up to where I sound the best?
This is a good
Right.
pace.
It's a good one. Okay. So you've seen the Tom Fleming's video. If you forget about labels like fulcrums and levers, because those are irrelevant, it's just the model we're looking at. And I did a thorough analysis of that video, and I did a PDF on it. So if I share my screen, I will show you what some of my analysis. Okay, this is your model, which I've turned in a functional way. On the top here, we have the hips, and those are the two legs. And the fourth bar is the ground, which is an open linkage. So the ground acts as a temporary 4-bar linkage from a 2-bar system.
Okay, hold on, Craig. So you're saying two of those linkages are hips.
That's the hips here, the top and
You're
here.
imagining them as for this model, and the
This is the ground.
and
With a
that
foot, yeah, and a
cross
foot.
piece at the bottom is the ground. Okay.
So this linkage is formed by contact with the feet at 2 points. So it's the external linkage. It's not a permanent 4-bar linkage. So as the back foot moves forward, it will re-establish a new link on the ground. Now I'll show you.
So
I'll show you.
Hold on.
I'll show you.
Yeah, but hold on a sec. So we can see Diane is kind of doing what I would call the bear there, and she's creating a multi-chain linkage with the ground. Each foot is on the ground, and the ground is part of her linkage.
Yes.
Okay.
That's good. We can always use our physical bodies as examples, and we all got one. So it's easy resource material. This is a robotic model. Of that model, we have the hips and then the two legs, and that's how it works. So that's how it connects. So on this leg to move forward, it re-establishes the linkage. So this is how the ground interacts with our system by using our linkages as the movable parts, which then re-establish. So when this leg moves forward, it forms it breaks the link and forms a new one, and the ground then informs the model, allows the model to react with the center of gravity. And this is a Lego model, and it's basically It's got lots of pooling in it, and that works. So it will only allow me to share one screen at a time. So just ask me more permission.
So what are you saying now, Craig?
I've got to try find. I've got other screens, but the Zoom won't allow me to share. It only allow me to share one screen at a time. So I've got. Can you see this one? Can you see this screen now?
Not yet.
It's asking me. It won't allow me to share it. Okay.
I think maybe you have to stop and start again.
Yeah, so this is a PDF. I'll just scroll through this PDF which I've got.
Wait, Steve, are you sharing? Okay, wait a minute. There we go.
Can you see this?
Not yet.
And it's only allowing me to share one screen, so I can't switch between pictures I've got.
Now it says you've started screen sharing.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So these are.
Hold on. I think you need to select the thing you're going to share. It's a two-step process, the screen sharing. I think you've what we've got right now is a black screen. So
yeah, it's not showing the. It only gives me permission to show one screen, so I can't switch my screens.
But right now you're not sharing. If you click share, it should give you options for which thing you want to share.
It only allows me to block, so it doesn't allow me to share.
I don't have anything coming up indicating that you would need permission. You already have permission to share.
Yeah, but it's not sharing that particular window.
Okay.
My windows, it only allows one window. Okay, let me try again now.
We don't have anything from you right now.
No, it's not sharing. Can you see that?
Nope. You click.
No, it's making here my browser is not allowing me to share this. So, unfortunately,
your browser is not allowing it.
Yeah, my browser, yeah.
Okay.
So it's from my side. I have a PDF which I can email to you, but it shows I've lost the original one I was showing you. So I've done an analysis of this mechanically, and basically those bars that are, if I can show you a physical model. Now, if you take one of those bars,
okay,
and it tilts like this, as Tom bends it, it moves around what he calls a fulcrum, but it's really a center point of the motion. Now, as he does that, this end moves further than the center. So I put a roll of tape on it. So as you lift the end up, you can unroll the tape. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So this is so as that bar lifts up, this tape here is unraveling a long distance. But as you get closer to the center of the bar, the distance gets shorter and shorter.
Sure.
Okay.
As you get closer to the
Um,
point around
yeah,
which it's moving.
it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
So what's happening there is towards the end of the stick, which is moving the furthest, this plate is moving, it's rotating more than where it's closer to the fulcrum. So that's imposing a thermal stress in the beam because the part of the beam is moving more at the end, and that is twisting the beam. Don't forget that twisting motion, people apply force with their hands, you can twist it with hands going opposite directions.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening in that system. So that twisting system is the same system as torsional bars being twisted. So as I twist, the fact that I can physically hold this and put pressure and twist this, it's not moving, it's rigid, but I can put force into that bar. And now, with force in that bar, which is a torsional spring, I can move this in potential and kinetic. It doesn't, that energy that's twisted is stored and doesn't affect potential and kinetic energy. So that's how our body torsions up. That's how it stores its energy from that motion. And because it's stored in this system, it can move without affecting potential or kinetic energy. So it can be released at any other point once you've moved the system, moved your body part. And that's where classic mechanics doesn't take that into account. It's either potential or kinetic. And that's where the bones store the springs, and the bones are thermal springs.
Great. Thank you.
So I've got a PDF which I can email to anyone who wants it to.
All right.
So basically,
We're getting
it
on.
shows that
Go ahead.
it shows that the body is this thermal system of which move around. So let's show you how they can use. Your legs can be each part of that system, your hips are part of that system. So it's not a micro scale, it's a macro scale. And it also applies at micro scales. But it's there, the body is visible and it's clear.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thank you. So we're getting on to 8 o'clock. I think we kind of need to go to final thoughts or comments. Graham, you haven't we've talked so much about CKCs today. And you've been an observer. Did you have anything?
No,
I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, I've enjoyed listening to the comments. I wonder if I can reply to Camilla's comment in the chat. Where is it? If I read it out, what does it mean when the movement exercise is biotensegrity informed? As much as I don't like definitions, how could we define it? And for me, biotensegrity informed exercises or movement doesn't mean anything at all, but that's just for me. The person who understands biotensegrity may devise a series of movements or exercises based on their understanding of biotensegrity, but that's different than being for the movement exercise itself to be biotensegrity informed. Or maybe I'm splitting hairs, but just a comment.
No, I like that. It's very nice. I'm just wondering what people are thinking because I think it would be nice to brainstorm about this. I feel like we might have different ideas, and of course, whatever the body is doing is biotensegrity informed. And I'm thinking about today. I worked with a woman, and she had a disc protrusion, spinal disc, and she's going for physiotherapy, and they are educating her to move in a way that the disc is pushed back in a way. Basically, that's the theory of it. And you know, that's an approach. Like she's in the hospital. And I was just working with her to feel the relationship with the ground, what's going on when she's just passively falling on the ground, when she's like lighter on the ground, like just with weight and just feeling her body basically. And it feels to me like when you can bend your elbow and you can be instructed in a way to bend your elbow, but you can be guided to do it in more lightness. That's so I guess my question is directed towards when people are saying I am biotensegrity informed, because I am using biotensegrity informed approach. What does that mean? You know, like what are the topics that you use in order to guide the people to be more friendly towards the lightness and spaciousness and interconnectedness and this kind of stuff. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it comes down to language a lot, doesn't it?
Yes,
And
thank you for
it's a great topic for probably a very long discussion. Go ahead, Diane. Oh, did Diane disappear?
She was saying goodbye.
Oh, she was saying goodbye.
Ah.
Thank you.
Well, I can jump in here a quick second. Camilla, I mean, I appreciate what you and Graham were both saying. I guess what in my mind that where my mind goes when you hear about um, this whole topic, it comes back to something Steve said in the video, which was basically when you have a closed kinematic chain and one bar locks up, well, the rest of the system locks up too. So my feeling as a manual therapist is my job is to try to unlock the bar and then go back into reintegrating that into the rest of the system, as you were saying and Diane was saying, Steve Sharfman was saying, and everything else. It's just then you got to get the whole system to move. So to me, the appropriate exercise will be is okay, where was this, which bar was not working, what part of the system, what part of the movement is not smooth, and how can I make it smooth and get everything to reintegrate. I mean, I guess that's my mindset of how I approach it and how I see it based on what I saw in Steve's video.
I love it. Sounds right.
All right,
Thank
we're
you.
running. Probably should get off soon. Jason, you had put a question in the chat. Did you want to ask your question, or you may not be there and you may not be available? And also Alejandro, I don't know if we've met before. Come and say hello and tell us where you're coming in from if you have a chance. Stephanie, I think we have met you, but I don't remember where you're from. And Lynn, I'm not sure I remember you either. I'm sorry. So anybody who wants to, last chance to come on screen and say something or ask something. All right, I'll take that as a not today.
Hello?
Oh, hello. Is that Alejandro?
Hi. Yeah, it's me, Alejandro. You can just call me Alex. Yeah, so I'm coming from Miami, Florida. I've been following the tensegrity uh s- perspective for a while now. I'm a massage therapist. I got my license back in 2012, but I actually more interested in the philosophical implications. I recently graduated, actually it was 2020 already. I graduated from Florida International University, psychology and philosophy. And I feel like there's a big movement in philosophy with regards to like perception and action, where tensegrity can really have like a big impact. So I'm kind of just um, trying to take in the information, to be honest. A little bit overwhelming, but I really appreciate these organizations, just being a fly on the wall and hearing all these perspectives. I really do appreciate it.
Hey, Alex. So you were
Mhm.
studying the ecological psychology or the ecological dynamics perspective?
I have, yeah, with Turvey and Gibson.
Oh,
Right.
wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I don't know if you saw our recent paper, but the Bouncing Bones paper, it's got a little bit of our connection with the ecological psychology people in there. It's really great. it's really great stuff that is a very deep dive. It requires a very deep dive in and of itself, and that I've been trying to grasp. So I look forward to more conversations between the two communities.
Oh, wonderful. I have to check out that article. I love the moving, what was it? Moving Beyond Vesalius article. That was wonderful and very enlightening. I'll have to check out this new Bouncing Bones article. And yeah, hoping to be able to contribute in a while. I'm currently right now arguing against a representationalist perspective on mind and perception. And I think there is a bit of tension arising in that field of philosophy where, yeah, I would love to see your research and see how that can apply and what can come out of it.
Yeah, and on YouTube there are some great interviews with Wagman and Blau around that.
I have to check that out. I'm not familiar with that.
Sometimes for me, it's easier to listen than to read. I need a break from the reading, so I'd highly recommend some of that. Great to meet you.
Thank you so much. And final request, do you mind putting that in the chat so I can look that up later?
Let's see. Yes,
Well, how
you
do you
hang on, and I will do that in just a minute. We're going to do a closing toast. So
Wonderful. Thank
people
you.
can, but if you hang out, I will certainly do that. How does that sound?
Great. Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for everyone who's still are. Some of us just can't get enough of it, right?
Yes.
And from the United States, those of us in the United States, we celebrate Thanksgiving next week. So happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Hi, Lynn. Where are you coming in from?
We've met. I've been in these in and out. I'm in Chelmsford, Mass.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I take Carol's Biotensegrity for the therapist. Bob's in there and a few other people. Yeah.
Ah, you're
So
in the physio group.
Yes.
That's
yes.
where I know you from.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, I just love absorbing it all. I'm that fly on the wall trying to process it all and put it all together.
Do you know I'm from Brockton?
Yes, I remember you saying that. Yes. So from the same area, that's great.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And
been great.
Alex, anyone who wants to stay can. I'm going to not be babysitting for a few minutes because I'm going to find these links for Alex and put them in the chat.